Um, Joe Biden's approval rating is basically going poorly due to his handling of Afghanistan, even though he did get us out of that 20-year war. But during his first week in office, he had an approval rating at 55% and a 37% disapproval rating. As of Thursday morning, his numbers for approval are sitting at 46% and then 49% disapproval, even though it's still higher than what Trump had, respectively. In the modern era, no president or squatter has ever had a lower approval rating at this point in their term, except for the squatter Donald Trump himself, who never topped a 50% approval rating. But there was little controversy about the causes of Biden's polling decline. The Delta variant soured voters on the president's handling of the pandemic, which basically most of that was on Trump anyway, while its adverse impact on growth dented Biden's credibility on the economy. Also, that was Trump's fault too. And of course, the haphazard end to America's 2-decade-long war in Afghanistan had brought Biden full weeks of wall-to-wall negative media coverage. These developments, when combined with the perennial tendency for sitting presidents or squatters to suffer approval declines over the course of their first terms, offer a satisfying explanation of Biden's political plight. A loss just because you know why your poll numbers have fallen does not necessarily mean you know how to pull them back to where they need to be. Some in the Democratic Party believe that the antidote to Biden's woes is straightforward. He simply needs to shepherd his historic economic agenda through Congress. And once the president makes good on his promise to improve the material conditions for the ordinary Americans by signing into effect his $3.5 trillion Build Back Better plan that includes a child allowance, the universal pre-kindergarten, paid family leave, enhanced Medicare benefits, public child care, green jobs, and many more. It's a critical mass of swing voters will rally to his side. But some within the party aren't so sure about this. After all, if delivering clear material benefits to voters was the key to presidential popularity, Biden should have seen a big polling boost upon his signing his American Rescue Plan back in March. That bill delivered 1,400 checks to over 85% of U.S. householders. The typical family of four received a $5,600 in immediate cash benefits courtesy of Uncle Joe. Then in July, 88% of Americans with small children also began receiving the monthly cash payments for each little one under their roofs. And yet, Biden did not enjoy any significant uptick in approval after the stimulus checks or child allowance payments hit. In fact, judging by one recent poll, most voters didn't even notice that the Democratic Party had improved their checking accounts balance. A daily Cost Civics survey taken in late August found only 57% of the voters saying that Biden hadn't done anything that benefited them personally. Yeah, that's the same thing that I felt with Trump. Some Democrats are inclined to read that as an indictment of the party's messaging rather than of the potential for progressive economic policy to move votes. It's not that voters won't reward Democrats for helping them materially, it's that they don't realize that Democrats have been doing so. Yet Democrats consciously designed their cash payment programs to be simple and conspicuous. And they went out of their way to call attention to those benefits in a sharp contrast to the party's approach to messaging its stimulus in 2009. If that wasn't enough to break through to the public in this era of fragmented media and mass civic disengagement, the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill won't either. After all, the bulk of that legislation's programs doesn't even take full effect until 2023 or later on. A report from McClatchy published on Thursday does a nice job of curating this debate. Stephen Weber remembers when he started to get worried about next year's midterm elections in March. He met a woman who cheerfully explained how she had just paid for long overdue car repairs after receiving an unexpected government payment, but politically speaking, there was a problem to this. This woman, who's a card-carrying member of a politically active grocers union, didn't know that Democrats had led the effort that was responsible for the influx of the cash. I don't think 1% of the reliable or frequent Democratic voters have even a decent understanding of what Democrats are trying to do in Washington, D.C. right now, said Weber, who's a former chair of the Missouri Democratic Party. These things get lost in the shuffle so fucking fast, said Bradley Baychok, who's a veteran Democratic strategist. It's not political malpractice, it's that we're living in a crazy fucking world right now, and when Delta comes back, people aren't thinking about what the government has given them. People less fortunate are thinking about how to survive here. There is a third pole in the argument besides Democrats need better messaging, and nothing matters. Voters won't reward Democrats for passing the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, even if they are made aware of its fucking contents. The Democratic data scientist David Shor thinks his party should pass Biden's agenda because it will make people's lives a lot better, but he argues that it won't do much to help the party politically, and it might even hurt it, as swing voters are generally biased towards the status quo and they're hostile towards significant policy change. When former President Lyndon Johnson had passed his Great Society agenda, which included the soon-to-be immensely popular Medicare and Medicaid programs, voters did not reward him in the ensuing midterms. Rather, the GOP gained 47 seats in the House and 3 in the Senate. And some political scientists believe that America's perennial midterm backlashes are typically motivated by the median voter's desire for policy moderation. The phenomenon of the thermostatic public opinion, in which the electorate's about policy views move left under the Republican squatters and right under the Democratic ones. It is consistent with the hypothesis. All this being said, I think that passing Biden's economic agenda in its entirety is the right thing for Democrats to do, both substantively and politically. My case for believing the $3.5 trillion bill's passage will be politically beneficial is fourfold. First, although there is evidence that major policy reforms spur the midterm backlashes, but Biden's reform agenda is exceptionally anodyne. The president is not trying to overhaul the U.S. healthcare system, or raise taxes on the middle class, or wage total war on any he's not trying to wage a war on any powerful corporate lobby. He is just trying to pass a long list of popular social welfare policies and public investments, all financed by the tax increases on the highest earning 1% of Americans. But none of this means that Biden's agenda will attract no backlash, but that backlash is likely to be unusually limited relative to the breadth of the president's reforms. Second, the legislative failure would demoralize the Democrats' activist base and spur a lot of media coverage portraying Biden as weak and ineffectual, which is what Trump was. Avoiding that outcome is a political imperative, even if one expects the president to derive relatively little electoral benefit from enacting the redistributive reforms. And third, and most speculatively, tongue-tied, the upcoming expiration of the American Rescue Plan's advanced child tax credits, also known as Biden's child allowance, gives Democrats an opportunity to raise the salience of their agenda and turn voters' status quo bias to their advantage. At the end of this year, a large majority of American families with young children will have received 6 monthly child support payments from Uncle Sam, each worth hundreds of dollars. The sudden disappearance of that income stream is liable to catch voters' attention in a way that its initial appearance did not. Loss aversion is among the most powerful forces in our politics. If Democrats' internal wrangling over the reconciliation bill carries on until December, and the expiration date on the monthly child benefits draws near enough to attract the media's notice and voters' awareness, it at least seems possible to me that Biden would secure the political benefit from a high-profile fight about whether those payments should continue on. And finally, passing a large spending bill will help shore up economic growth ahead of the 2022 and 2024 elections. And this is really the strongest argument for why good policy is still good politics. Voters might not reliably reward the progressive policy change, but they do generally still view the incumbents more favorably when the macroeconomic conditions are good. The most recent Consumer Price Index data suggests that this year's inflation is transitory and that high unemployment is our economy's primary malady. Regardless of whether the Democrats pass this $3.5 trillion spending bill, next year will witness a reduction in the government's direct contribution to economic expansion. But unlike the president's front-loaded and deficit-financed American Rescue Plan, the impending legislation doles out its funding over a 10-year period, and it offsets the bulk of its new spending with taxes. Thus, even if this bill passes, the economy will receive less fiscal support in 2022 than it did in 2021. Nevertheless, if Democrats do not pass any further spending bill, the step down in fiscal support to growth will be considerably larger, according to the economist people at J.P. Morgan. None of this is to say that passing Biden's agenda will save the Democratic Party's control of Congress, but it seems unlikely that anything can do that. Republican gerrymandering alone might be sufficient to erase Nancy Pelosi's slim House majority, but even in completely immoral political terms, Building Back Better is preferable to the alternative of what we're going to see. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening.